The hosts are ready. Great. So welcome again from the Redwood Forest. I'm in Karuna Buddhist Vihara in California, Boulder Creek. And I think the road is called something like Bear Creek or something, but there's no bears, so I should be safe. And today is a response to some of your requests at the last session at the Sutta class. A couple of you asked about the danger in the 5 sense doors and also guarding the senses. And this is a really wonderful, huge, meaty topic, actually, that is rarely drawn out in much depth, I think, in most teachings, because we tend to place a great emphasis on virtue of body and speech, largely. And also we tend to place a lot of emphasis on mindfulness and meditation practice. But the sense restraint is something that kind of links up the two. And it is both an aspect of virtue. It's more about the mental aspect, how we use our mind in skillful or unskillful ways to increase our own happiness and virtue inwardly, beneficial states, or we use our minds in ways that are less skillful and create a lot of suffering for ourselves. So we'll be looking at that and how we can apply it to our daily life, but also how that's a really incredible preparation and foundation for practice. And even on the cushion, much of what we're doing is actually sense restraint. I actually like the word guarding the senses more than restraining them. And I heard a talk by Ajahn Brahm recently where he actually said that the word vara, samvara, the main word for that's usually translated as sense restraint is indriya samvara sila. So it's an aspect of sila, virtue, and samvara means restraint. Indriya means sense doors. And vara actually means like a door. So samvara really means, like, if you think of it as a door, it's kind of like a protection, isn't it? It's kind of like a guard that keeps unwholesome states from coming in and also preserves the wholesome states that we have within ourselves and allows them to multiply. It's more of a guard, a door, a way of governing our mind than a restraint, but it can be seen both ways. So we'll get into that more. I haven't prepared this very much apart from to bring in a few suttas and a few examples. So it may be more of seeing what comes up and responding also to your questions. But we'll begin with a meditation and we'll see if we can use one of the Buddhist similes in our meditation to just give us a sense of seclusion and a sense of turning inward to look for whatever happiness and peace may be there in our minds. So if you're ready, please gently close your eyes and adjust yourself so that your body is really comfortable and at ease. This is always the first step in meditation. As you could see before you had your eyes closed, I'm in a very beautiful forest. There's only a very light breeze and the trees are incredibly still, incredibly tall. Actually encircling where I'm sitting, so I feel protected, I feel enclosed. That's the sound of a generator, sign of human life. But behind me is a little stream. I don't know if you can hear that. It's gently running through the forest. So even if you're in your own home, perhaps you could take some of that imagery, or perhaps the imagery of being in a secluded cave, taking that in to your meditation, recognizing that now you are alone and you're supported in that aloneness by the presence, the company of spiritual friends. a community of hermits, as Ajahn Brahm likes to refer to his monastery. So it's wonderful to have the support of other like-minded people. And that safety that allows us to go deep inside. And perhaps just for a moment, recognizing all of those busy worldly activities that you've now set aside. Whether a trust meeting, a work meeting, or a ride home through transport. Maybe even just cooking your lunch, your dinner. All the sights have disappeared. The main sound, hopefully for you now, is the sound of my voice. And there's lots of silence in the spaces between the words. So the eyes and the ears can gently turn inward, turn off. Most likely smells, tastes are not too disturbing. So all the sense doors in the head can cool down. And this helps to bring you more in contact with the physical bodily sensations. The sense door of physical touch. Sensing your body sitting, hopefully grounded. The weight supported by your chair or cushion. And perhaps a sense of extension through the spine. As though your head were gently reaching up to the light, just like the top of these beautiful redwood trees. Their roots are spread into the earth, not so deeply as I expected, but they're spread firmly and stably. And the head is reaching like the trees and the branches reach towards the sky. So you feel upright yet grounded. And just noticing any sensations that you feel predominantly in your body. If there is any tension or pain, strain, particularly around the joints, or maybe due to an uneven distribution of weight, you can gently adjust it at this stage. And this gives your body a signal that it's in a very kind and friendly presence of your own mind. You're not here to push it around or contort it in ways that are really unnatural for you. You're just listening to your body and allowing it to find some ease. You might wish to roll your shoulders gently back. Whenever I do that, I get these clicks in my shoulders. That just reminds me to release that tension or that strain that may have been caused by sitting at the desk for too long. And then gently, if it's good for you, just doing a very gentle body scan to really check through each and every part of the body. And as your mindfulness illuminates whatever sensations you're aware of over there, perhaps starting from the top of the head, or if you prefer, from the tips of the toes. As the mindfulness reaches those areas, make that mindfulness a medium through which your kindness, your care, your deep listening can flow. Just staying inside the body, not concerned with any sights, sounds. But committing all your awareness to the experience of the body and the sensations that you feel right now, as though they were the most important thing in the world. And your only job is to care for them right now. And to use a simile from the Buddha to help you remain within yourself, I'd like to just summarize a little story that the Buddha told. He said, and this is addressed to the monastics, in the past, a tortoise was searching for food along the bank of a river one evening. On that same evening, a jackal was also searching for food along the bank of that same river. When the tortoise saw the jackal in the distance searching for food, it drew its limbs and neck inside its shell and passed the time keeping still and silent. The jackal had also seen the tortoise in the distance searching for food, so he approached and waited close by, thinking, when this tortoise extends one or another of its limbs or its neck, I will grab it right on the spot, pull it out and eat it. But because the tortoise did not extend any of its limbs or its neck, the jackal, failing to gain access to it, lost interest in it and departed. So too, meditators, Mara, the personification, if you like, of our own defilements or unwholesome states, is constantly and continually waiting close by, thinking, perhaps I'll gain access to this person through the eye or through the ear, through the tongue or the nose or the body, or through the mind. Therefore, we dwell guarding the doors of the sense faculties. Having seen a form with the eye, we do not grasp at its signs and features, since if we left the eye faculty unguarded, bad, unwholesome states of craving and aversion might invade you. Similarly, if at this time any visual images arise in the mind, or any sounds or odors, tastes, or any tactile sensations arise, we don't grasp at its signs and features. That means we're not running after these things with craving or with aversion, trying to push them away, but just let them be and stay inside with the mind. In a similar way, we guard the mind itself, noticing what the mind is inclining toward. Is your mind inclining to peace, to silence, to stillness? Or is it thinking in ways that disturb that peace, that stir up water on the clear pool of the mind? So then in this sutta, the Buddha says that when we thus dwell guarding the doors of the sense faculties, Mara, that is any unwholesome qualities, fail to gain access. Mara loses interest in us and departs, just as the jackal departed from the tortoise. So let's see if we can continue to practice staying with the physical feelings in the body, or perhaps the breath, or even just the silence, the peace in the mind. And noticing any time that your mind is pulled outward, accepting it, and just drawing yourself back in, like the tortoise, passing the time, keeping still and silent inside. And as we sit here quietly like tortoises in our shells, we know that the jackal will get tired pretty soon and depart. So long as we stay mindful, aware, with an attitude of kindness and patience, respect, we're safe inside our shell. Nothing outside can harm us. Or we may even find the happiness of peace. Every time we reconnect with the body, with the breath, even just part of it, one breath, we are safe. Mara cannot find us. We're turning away from the five sense world, turning towards simplicity, contentment, and turning towards peace. Just enjoying 2 or 3 more breaths, or as many as you wish. You don't have to open your eyes. Just recognizing the peace that you feel right now compared to when you began. Sometimes we look for great results, but they can be just a simple quietening of the mind, a quietening of the senses. And in that quietening, there is happiness. There is a sense of peace. So I will ring the bell and hopefully get a little bit of a resonance on it this time. And at the end of the 3rd ringing, if you wish, you may gently open your eyes and notice when you open your eyes how the mind is pulled, perhaps towards wholesome things, or perhaps that sight, the impressions of the eye, vision, the forms are disturbing to the peace, in which case you're very welcome to close your eyes again. Great. Thank you. It makes me peaceful just watching you. I don't get a lot of meditation. I'm sort of in it with you. And sometimes, usually I close my eyes completely, but this time I was reading a little bit from the suttas. So I was peeking at you all, and just seeing people meditate is so calming and inspiring. I sense that peace and pick it up from you. Did the bell resonate at all? We tried to change the sound settings. Yay, yay, someone's thumbs up. Thanks, Reed. I also realized that in my chanting, when I make Sabe Sata, normally it's Sabe Sata for you guys. So we finally, after 2 years or more, found the settings. And this is the reason we need fellow bhikkhunis. I'm here with other spiritual friends who are helping me with these things. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that meditation. How was that for you? Any thumbs up or thumbs down in the chat? Yeah, very good. So as I said, today's talk is about seeing the danger in the 5 senses. We might have to extend it to the 6th, ultimately. But for now, the 5. And also the practice of sense restraint or guarding the senses, which is all, of course, a part of that. Because if there is a danger in these senses, then we want to be sure that we're using our senses wisely. We have these 6 senses, and I will define them in a while. But as long as we're human beings and we're alive, then this is part and parcel of having a body, having a human life. So it's not that we can avoid these things or that we should be, but the Buddhist practice helps us to see that that happiness doesn't lie in stimulating those senses. It doesn't lie in the sense pleasure outside ourselves. And yet this is the way the world is mostly moving. It's moving toward that gratification through the senses because we don't know really anything else. And the Buddha here is coming along and saying there is another way. And in fact, the input, the sense impressions can be an agitation to peace. They can be an agitation to the happiness inside. And that there is a happiness that is more sublime than the happiness of sensual pleasure. Or, of course, obviously, the unpleasant contact at the sense doors. So as long as we have these sense doors, there is bound to be contact. And this is where the issue begins, right? So the sense doors, in short, as the Buddha describes them, are the eye, Yeah, and we have the eye, but the eye on its by itself doesn't see. It's only when the eye comes into contact with sights, with visual forms, and that contact creates the eye consciousness, in the sense that eye consciousness turns on, that we see and that we recognize a person or a microphone or a bell. So it's only at that point of contact that we have an experience through the eye sense door, including eye consciousness. And from there, in the Paticca Samuppada, the Buddha says that from contact, there's Vedana, there's feeling that arises. That feeling can be pleasant, unpleasant, or somewhere in between, what we might call neutral, that we don't really feel anything particularly pleasant or unpleasant, but fairly nondescript. And often, I'm sure for yourselves, you prefer to have pleasant eye contact than unpleasant eye contact. So we prefer to be in a forest where we're looking at Buddha statues and beautiful trees than we do to perhaps be in a city or looking maybe at a dirty toilet bowl. Or I remember the first dirty toilet bowl I saw outside of England was in Egypt, and it was literally crawling with maggots. And that was the only place to do my business. And so I had to go into this little shack with this filthy kind of squat toilet. And I was like, it's moving. What's moving here? And I realized it was just like a whole layer of maggots. The eye doesn't like this. And of course, the smell was there as well. So, but that's not the only danger. The only danger isn't in the unpleasant sights or the unpleasant sounds, smells, tastes, or touches. It's also in that contact itself. Because it has the tendency to be co-joined, let's say, with craving and aversion. Yeah. So in another sutta, the fire sermon, the Buddha says that the eye, the ear, the nose, the body, the tongue, and also the mind, yeah, are burning with the fires. Fires of what? Fires of greed, hate, and delusion. These things are burning with that. And so on the one hand, we could say it's the clinging to these sense doors that are the problem, but the Buddha goes deeper than that and actually says that it's these senses in and of themselves that are suffering, because wherever there's contact, there is going to be feeling, and that feeling leads to craving, clinging, and becoming. Yeah, and then that leads to the whole mass of suffering, increasing and increasing. And this might be a little bit of a difficult message to hear because we are in this world. And yet this isn't really the point. The point of this message is that there's a happiness far more sublime and beautiful and stable and secure than the happiness that's available through the senses. And that happiness begins with the path, with sila, with the practice of virtue by body and speech. You could say that the practice of sense restraint is the practice of mental virtue. It's the practice of learning how to use our mind in wholesome ways, so that we don't only speak in a kind manner, but that speech is motivated by genuine care, genuine metta. So the motivation of the mind is very pure. So in a sense, we can't even have strong sila without practicing some degree of sense restraint, because the mind will be drawn to things that cause it trouble. For example, you might see two people having an argument and maybe fighting each other, or maybe you've read the news. And because of that, we get very upset and distressed, or maybe anger also arises in us. And so because of this, our minds kind of increase in aversion, right? If we don't know how to meet that aversion at the root, and then we act in ways that are unskillful and reinforce that unwholesome root. So, but if we can see the way the mind is moving, the way the mind is starting to get tense or stressed or agitated, then if we're able to stay at that level of the sense contact before we break out into unwholesome speech, we can restrain, we can protect our sila, we can protect our virtue. So in a way, the two things go hand in hand. Yeah. And again, just to say that the Buddha never denied that there's gratification to be found in sense experience. So again and again in the suttas, he talks about the gratification, the danger, and the escape. Yeah. And of course, the gratification is why we're here in the human form. because we're still hungry for that sense contact. We're still hungry for beautiful sights and sounds, beautiful or pleasant physical touch or physical experience. You know, we like to be hugged. We don't like to be pushed around. You know, we're looking for pleasant experiences mentally as well. We want the peace. We don't want the craving. We don't want the wandering thoughts. And so because of this, we're kind of stuck in samsara. You know, we're always fighting with the situation instead of learning to understand it as it is. And the Buddha said, if beings were not enamored with sense contact, then we wouldn't experience the clinging and the craving towards these experiences, right? So we are enamored with it. And so there is some gratification there, but that gratification is so short-lived. Have you ever been able to look at a beautiful sight all day long for 24 hours without getting bored? Even the most beautiful forest, you know, sometimes you can think, I could live here forever. But after a while, it becomes normal again. Yeah. Sometimes I show people photos of England and the English countryside, thinking, yeah, I don't know, it's just normal to me. And they go, wow, it's so pretty. But for me, it's just a field. When I was staying with Diana in Massachusetts, we did that. And she was saying, I've got this book on England and it's really lovely. It shows all the cities. I was like, yeah, it's quite nice on a sunny day. But when I look out in the countryside, I see, yeah, fields and sheep and, you know, the same old thing. But to somebody from here, that's really pretty. That's beautiful. So it's not a permanent source of pleasure. And then the Buddha says there is also a danger. And if we didn't see the danger in these senses, there would be no repulsion or disenchantment or weariness from the sense realm. So this is interesting because many of us might think, yeah, but I don't want to feel weary and disenchanted with the sense realm. But that disenchantment, the word nibbida, which literally means being repelled from that realm, is a really important part of the path. And it's a pivotal part of the path. It's that force in the mind that kind of moves the mind away from suffering, away from the world of the senses, and inward towards the path of peace. So it's not that we're repelled from the sense world with aversion, but more with wisdom. And this comes as a result of seeing things as they really are, yeah? Which of course is a result of deep meditation. So it's a gradual training, it's a gradual refinement of happiness. And after a while, we just get tired of playing around in that realm. It's like a child getting tired of playing with the same toys. You know, it's not that the child's angry with the toys or kind of looks down on them or judges them in any way, but you've had enough of those. And now you want something a little bit more satisfying, a little bit more meaningful and more productive of lasting joy, the kind of joy and peace that's stable and that's reliable, which these senses can never really give us. So if there was no danger, we wouldn't be able to experience this sense of disenchantment. And he further says that if there was no escape, there is also an escape. If there was no escape, beings would not find that escape. And what is that escape from the five senses and the six senses ultimately? That escape is nibbana. It is this unconditioned happiness that is lasting and stable and beyond this five sense and six sense realm. There's another really nice sutta called The End of the World. And I've got a lot of suttas I wanted to bring in today, but this one's worth mentioning because I looked in the footnotes to it. It's in the Samyutta Nikaya. And anyway, if anybody's a sutta junkie, you can look at page 1413 in the footnote. And Bhikkhu Bodhi there, he says that the six sense bases are in a sense the world, because the six sense bases are the way we experience life. You know, if there's no eye, ear, sight, sound, no nose and smells, no tongue and taste, no body and touch, and no mind, then there is no world for us, right? So the Buddha said that we have to walk to the end of the world. We have to get to the end of the world. And there are six sense bases of the world. They're part of the world, but they're also the media, Bhikkhu Bodhi says, for the manifestation of that world. You know, unless the eye meets a form and consciousness arises, then we don't see anything. And so he said that making an end of the world is really making an ending of suffering. And that is nibbana. and that Nibbana, among other things, is actually known as the cessation of the 6 sense bases. Yeah, it's also the cessation of the 5 khandhas: body, feeling, perception, mental volition, and consciousness. Yeah, I've missed one out, have I? Consciousness, perception, mental volition, feeling, that's 5. So that is what the Buddha means by making an end of the world. And Nibbana can be called the cessation of those 6 sense bases or 6 sense doors. So on the one hand, this sense restraint is leading us all the way to Nirvana. And on the other, I was reading various suttas and I found a really lovely one here. And this talks more about the danger of not having that sense restraint. And the danger here is that we are not able to experience samadhi without sense restraint. Yeah. So not only does it block us from Nibbana, it blocks us from all the other steps, of course, leading up to that. And I love this one because it talks about the sequence of meditation. So this one is called dwelling negligently, and it's the Samyutta Nikaya Salayatana Samyutta. That's number 35, number 97. Okay, so for anyone who wants to look, Samyutta Nikaya 35, number 97. So here the Buddha says why, again, this sense restraint is so important and the dangers of not having proper sense restraint. So he says, monastics, I will one who dwells negligently, and about how one dwells diligently. Listen to that. And how does one dwell negligently? If one dwells without restraint over the eye faculty, the mind is soiled, which means it is kind of tainted by kilesas. Yeah, impurities can come in like greed and aversion, irritation, agitation, etc., clinging. And it is soiled among forms cognizable by the eye. If the mind is soiled, there is no gladness. There's no pamoja. When there is no gladness, there is no rapture, piti. When there is no rapture, there is no tranquility, passaddhi. When there is no tranquility, one dwells in suffering. So normally in this sequence, it's the sequence towards samadhi states. We start off with the gladness and the rapture, the tranquility, and from tranquility, we get happiness, sukha. But here one dwells in dukkha, dukkha viharati, instead of sukha viharati, dwelling in happiness. So the sequence goes wrong. It doesn't even take off, right? And one dwells in suffering. Then further, he says that the mind of one who suffers does not become still. In other words, samadhi doesn't happen. And again, many of you here have known my teachings, the Buddha's teachings, for a long time. And happiness is the proximate cause for stillness, not suffering. So when the mind suffers, one does not become concentrated, one does not become stilled. One is not able to enter deep samadhi of jhana. When the mind is not stilled or concentrated, phenomena do not become manifest. So I had to look in the footnotes for that, because what does it mean phenomena do not become manifest? And it could mean any kind of phenomena that could lead to wisdom, you know, basically anything that we can see through the lens of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, in other words, impermanence, suffering, and non-self. We've got to be able to see all phenomena, all of reality as suffering, impermanent, and non-self. And those phenomena do not become manifest. And then in the footnotes, Bhikkhu said that this could mean in this context that the internal and external sense bases do not appear as impermanent, suffering, and non-self, right? So we're still grasping at those sense bases. We're still allowing them to rule us rather than being able to govern those sense bases through our practice. And we're not able to see their impermanence, yeah? Because we cannot, as I said, depend on the eye or depend on the ear. We cannot even depend on this mind. Sometimes the mind's bright and joyful, other times the mind is dull and full of worries or, you know, agitated, irritated. The mind itself is also changing, right? We cannot even rely on that. Even the deepest states of meditation, the jhanas, you know, or even more refined states are conditioned and volitionally produced. They're not permanent, they're not lasting. You wouldn't believe what's happening here. I'm having good sense. I don't know if I'm having good sense restraint or sense pleasure, but the other nun who's staying here, she's coming out and pouring like a foot bath for me while I'm teaching. Can you imagine? Isn't that so sweet? So she just came out with the kettle and poured more warm water into the foot bath. It's just the sweetest thing. So so that's a kind of sense restraint, in the sense that although it's pleasant and I could have had like quite a bit of craving, really what I feel is such joy and gratitude by such loving kindness. Anyway, just to interrupt this rather deep and serious talk. So because we're not stilled in our mind, stilled and quieted internally, we're not able to basically have that insight that would break through this delusion and allow us to enter the stream. Yeah. So it begins with sense restraint. And whatever, the Dhamma is so wonderful, because really I could have given a talk on virtue, I could have given a talk on mindfulness. And in each case I could say, you know, it begins with virtue, or it begins with sense restraint, or it begins with mindfulness, because everything is like this beautiful cake, you know, and you take a piece out of that cake. From any place you take that slice of cake, it tastes delicious. But the cake is a whole and everything belongs. It's all part and parcel of the teachings, and we can come at it from any angle. So basically, all of this begins with right view, right? The first thing we have to do, as I said, is understand how to use these senses in a wise way. We're not here to shut down the senses, you know, we're not here to take out our eye or to not care if we have an ear infection and go deaf. That's not the point, you know, we look after our senses. They're precious and they can be a great support to us on the path. But we do live in this sense world, and sense contact is inevitable. So we must know the direction with which to work with these things, yeah? And the first job then is to work with the senses in a skillful way. Yeah. Later on, we can actually look at overcoming and moving beyond that realm of the five senses completely in deep meditation. But first, we need to learn to work with them in a skillful way. Yeah. And right view, one of the definitions of right view is to be able to distinguish the wholesome from the unwholesome mental states, to be able to distinguish right intention from wrong, harmful intention. Yeah. So we have to know where the mind is coming from. Yeah. Is it coming from a place of kindness, gentleness, letting go, or is it coming from a place of grasping, aversion, even cruelty and harm? Yeah. And also we need to know, like, am I using my senses in a way that lead to the wholesome states increasing? Or, for example, am I watching the news to the point where the empathy turns into empathetic distress? Yeah, that's just one example of how sense contact can start off as being quite wholesome. But if we indulge in that for too long, we might not notice when the mind is becoming soiled and the kilesas are arising and increasing in our mind, the unwholesome states. So some of these ways, I just thought of a few examples, but I'd really be curious to hear from you after this talk about your own examples in daily life. I was speaking to my friend Ayachitananda here and talking about this, and she said one thing that applies probably to most people in the world, even if not to monastics so much, is going shopping. Yeah, you might be going shopping, looking for some food, and you have your shopping list there to keep you on track. But you get into the bakers and, you know, they pump out these artificial smells. Have you come across that? Like as if some muffin or something is baking there and then. Of course, it's just chemicals mostly. And you think, oh, you know, and you get enticed, you get allured by that smell. And then you buy these cakes and realize when you get home that actually I have a gluten allergy, but never mind, you know, it's too delicious to avoid. And then you eat not one, but two and three, and eventually feel quite sick, right? How many times has this happened? Maybe you don't have any allergies, but you know, we tend to overindulge sometimes if that craving, that clinging is stimulated in our mind. So this is a whole combination of the eye sense door, the nose sense door, And of course, all the adverts that you see, you know, the billboards saying, buy me, buy me, buy me, you need me. And if you buy me, you'll be happy forevermore. Have you ever been sucked in by that? Ajahn Brahm actually defines, he translates sometimes one of the definitions for sense restraint as being sucked in by its signs and features. So in the text, it says, grasping at the signs and features of a particular sense impression. So for example, if you see a beautiful person, you look at their hair or you look at their sparkly eyes, you know, and you're kind of grasping at those particular things that actually increase lust, right? So we shouldn't do that. We should look at the whole of the person. We should also recognize that this is just a human being with a body, and that body, if you don't wash it, quickly becomes quite smelly, quite dirty, and no different from mine, right? Underneath the skin, which might look glossy and smooth, there's just blood and flesh and all kinds of liquids and waste products in there. So, you know, we might not have to look at a person in that way, but at least we can see them as a human being. I mean, one of my practices, and it's not really a very intentional practice because I don't really have struggles with lust, but certainly in monastic life, for some people, that is an issue. And I really enjoy sort of being a shaven-headed renunciate and just having all these other monastic friends who pretty much look the same, you know, and seeing the monks as my brothers, just seeing them as spiritual friends on the path, you know, seeing the nuns as my sisters. They're not people I need to compare myself to or compete with. They're people who I can lend support to and who can also lend me their beautiful mutual support. So it's a really beautiful way of kind of equalizing beings, you know, just kind of relating to each other as spiritual companions rather than objects for our pleasure or entertainment in the way that we do in the world at large, in the way many people do, right? So anyway, not getting sucked into those things. And another thing that struck me, you know, just even from the sutta class on Friday was that, you know, there are horrific things happening in the world. And again, it's maybe not right always to turn away from that. You know, it's good to be informed. I think it's good to know and to understand, you know, the kind of things that can lead to that. I mean, for me, immediately it's a check as to whether, you know, I still have the roots of hate and delusion and greed, that I could be capable in such circumstances of also perpetrating harm, you know, on another. Perhaps it's still within me, and I'm sure it is, you know, unless I'm an anagami, then I have these roots of greed, hate, and delusion inside. And so it can be good to watch these things and to understand what's happening, perhaps to be able to give some aid or raise awareness or even support refugees if they allow them in. You know, vote for the political parties that will have compassionate policies towards refugees, for example. You know, vote for systems of social welfare with social conscience, protecting the weaker members of society. These are all things that we can do as good Buddhists. And of course, there may be people who vote differently, you know, with very good intentions as well. I'm not saying that all Buddhists should be on the left, although I'd kind of like to, I have to admit. But anyway, but I know that's not the case, right? And we can also cling to our views. So the main thing is our intentions. Where are we coming from? You know, why are we making the decisions we make? And are they really for the good of the whole? And, you know, I know for myself, if I watch these kind of things on the news and just hear about it day in, day out, it creates distress. It creates suffering that is not really that helpful to myself or to anyone else. And if we do find ourselves burning out with that empathetic distress, we're not actually in much of a position to take clear action. We're not really clear enough mentally, you know. The Buddha said that the hindrances are those things that cloud the mind, that obscure the mind, that obstruct wisdom. So when we're not able to make proper decisions, we're not as effective in helping. And so it's really important to just acknowledge that, yes, it's sad, it's very sad. And, you know, there will be maybe anger and despair arising, but at that moment, do you want to stay in that realm of indulging the senses? And it is a kind of indulgence, right, with the bad news. Or is it time to just step back, go inside, and look at what's arising with a heart of compassion and kindness, using that self-compassion to respond to the distress within ourselves. This is so important, and this can really give us much more strength. And if we're able to have that compassion towards ourselves, then we can gradually extend that compassion towards those who are suffering, and really practice trying to look toward and to act toward the end of their suffering, so that compassion isn't only a sentiment that we have on our seat, but it actually translates into action, action for the good of all and for the end of suffering of all beings everywhere. Yeah. That way, the compassion doesn't turn into distress and sadness. I also wanted to bring in the example of Facebook, because that is one of my kind of weaknesses sometimes, and not so much now because I'm kind of really connected with real life people. But during the pandemic, it was sometimes a danger because I didn't have anyone around. And I'd noticed that I'd go onto Facebook purely to spread the Dhamma, purely to kind of put on a post about, the events that are upcoming, or a few words of inspiration, even just some pictures that might bring a bit of sunshine into a person's life, But then what happens, even to me, and I've been meditating a long time, and I'm sure many of you as well, so it happens to you too, I'm sure. Maybe not, is that there's a kind of dopamine hit, right? And it's a really strange thing because it doesn't feel very pleasant, but there's this kind of apparently dopamine that starts getting generated in the brain. And we start scrolling through these feeds, looking for the next post that's going to kind of bring some kind of funky Dhamma teaching into our lives, or kind of maybe capture our imagination with a beautiful photo or whatever it is. Do you notice yourself doing that? You're stuck on that thing, you're kind of hooked, and then you're not really enjoying it anymore, but you think, okay, but if I keep going, I'll find something worth reading, right? And before you know it, a whole hour has passed you by. And this is, again, is a case of sense restraint. Yeah, we're not guarding the senses. We're not seeing, it is literally addictive, correct? We're not seeing where that good motivation turns into wasting time and turns into something that actually drains our energy, so that then if you go to meditate, you find you're already too tired. You could have spent that hour sitting on the cushion, listening to a good Dhamma talk and meditating, actually emptying the mind. And lastly, I'd just like to bring up the disliked person, because we all have one of those or more in our lives. Do we? Is anyone here without any kind of animosity to anyone at all? Anyone? No? I used to be. I have to say, there was a long period of years and years in my life that there was no one in my life. Maybe it was a very selective life that I had any animosity or any kind of unfinished business with at all. And it was so wonderful. And now that I'm in this role, sometimes it's challenging, sometimes people project stuff onto you or speak to you in ways that feel a little bit sharp or disrespectful. And, I'm meeting thousands of people, at least, online, less so in person at the moment. And, sometimes it's difficult. And I think, gosh, I wouldn't choose to be around this in my ordinary life. But this is the way it is, right? And we can find some irritation, some agitation arising. And at that time, the Buddha gave some very clear instructions about how to focus on the good part of that person, how to focus on their qualities and strengths, not to deny the parts which may be less than admirable to you, maybe to others. Those faults that you see are actually qualities and strengths. So it's not to deny that, but it's to protect your own mind. Yeah. Because as long as we're not actually enlightened and free from hindrances at the very least, we're not actually seeing things as they really are in their entirety, in their fullness. We're not really having an objective perception about anything or anyone. And so it's a skillful means for our own mental well-being and for the protection of ourselves and for that other to focus on the good. And we can do that for ourselves as well. We don't have to always talk and bring up our weaknesses to ourselves and to others. How many wonderful strengths do each of us have? How many beautiful qualities maybe you don't have in the quantity or proportion you'd like, but you're developing in your heart right now. You know, I see so many. I mean, I see you listening to this talk with kind of a real sense of openness and interest, and I'm kind of blown away. You know, it's just so beautiful to think that people want to hear the Dhamma and people are open to hearing that and to taking some of it on board. So, you know, these are all qualities we can rejoice in within ourselves and also within others around us. You know, we can tell each other, right? We can tell each other the qualities we see. Even if it's your partner and you never do that, forget about it. You can change at any moment and do something outside the box, give it a go and see what happens, right? And the Buddha says that one way to overcome anger is to think thoughts of loving kindness, not only in public, not only speak words of loving kindness to that person's face, but also to think thoughts of loving kindness in private as well. So that while you're alone, you know, maybe you're just washing up and you might think, you know what, that person yesterday, they were a bit rough with me on the phone. Yeah, but you know, perhaps that hurt me at that time. But at the same time, that person has this and this quality. Oh, may they be happy, you know, may they be happy and may those qualities grow. You can have these thoughts in your daily life. You can notice when you're moving into negativity and turn it around. And if you start thinking that way about that person, and then even perhaps taking them to the cushion, figuratively speaking, in your mind, and use them as your object of loving kindness. Yeah? Choose them, I should say, not use them. And that's more of a gift. And generate thoughts of loving kindness towards them. Picture them happy and well. And you'll be surprised that when you meet that person, there'll be less friction. They may not feel quite so defensive. You know, don't you? If you meet someone who's been saying bad things about you, you kind of know. There's a kind of lack of, how to say, there's something shifty, isn't there, about them in the atmosphere. It's like they know they've been saying bad things and now they've got to try and, you know, put on a good face in your presence. So people feel it, and we can do this in private too. And then, of course, on retreat, we can go that step further in sense restraint and actually start to turn away from the sense world altogether, like we did just now. So I use that little sutta of the tortoise because I think it's a very beautiful sutta about just bringing in our limbs, closing our eyes, closing our ears as best we can. You know, sounds will be there, but we just let them be. Feelings will be there, but after a while, once we've cared for them, we let them be. You know, we go inward and we make our sensory impression so much smaller. So maybe just the breath, it's just a very, very refined perception. Still physical bodily sensation, it's the body sense door, but it's much more refined. And slowly, as you meditate with the breath, you might find that that breath starts to become softer and softer and even disappears, even maybe turns into more of a mental image of the breath, like a softness or a light or a luminescence. And then we're getting more and more deeply into the mind, into that stillness and silence. And check it out. There's peace to be found. There's peace to be found in that place. And it's tuning up to that peace, that joy, that happiness of being secluded from the sensual world that really gives us the encouragement to take this path further. It's not a scary path. It's a beautiful path. And it's an encouraging path, you know, and it's step by step. We don't have to push ourselves too far too soon. Yeah, the process is joyful and the process is wonderful. And just to finish, lastly, because I just love this sutta, the Buddha basically said, whatever is not yours, abandon it. The eye is not yours, the nose is not yours, the tongue, ear, body, even the mind is not yours. Abandon all that's not yours, because this will be for the happiness and benefit of yourself for a long time to come. And that is just from memory. I haven't read the exact words of the Buddha in that sutta. I think I wrote down the quote. It was Samyutta 35, 101. It's not far away, so I'll just make sure that I got the phrasing right, because it's very beautiful. So yes, he's saying that the eye is not yours, forms are not yours, eye consciousness is not yours, eye contact is not yours, and whatever feeling arises with eye contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful, neither pleasant nor painful, that too is not yours. Abandon it. When you've abandoned it, it will lead to your welfare and happiness. And he goes through all of the senses, including the mind. The mind is not yours. Whatever feeling arises with mind contact as a condition. We skipped a few here. So the mind is not yours. Mental objects are not yours. Mind consciousness is not yours. Mind contact is not yours. Whatever feeling arises with mind contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful, neither pleasant nor painful, that too is not yours. Abandon it. When you've abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness. So I think that's plenty. And it's a big subject. But hopefully it was a mixture of theoretical, practical, and yeah, it's just a really big subject. Maybe we should do it again, because I didn't really get to talk about the place of the sense restraint in the gradual training. But it's part and parcel of the path, and I'm hoping that it's something you can really apply and use in your everyday life as a kind of bridge between what you do, you know, when you're really not thinking about Buddhist practice and when you're sitting on the cushion. It's something you can apply at all those in-between moments in life, whenever you can think about it, whenever you have, say, a negative thought, whenever you see that the mind is turning towards suffering. Maybe the problem is in the lack of sense restraint, in the way you're using your mind, in the way you're perceiving, the way you're attending, and the way you're allowing those unwholesome states to arise. So see if you can catch it there, and that will be of great support in your practice. I think of it almost like maintenance. You know, you go to a retreat, it's like having a deep clean of the kitchen. So everything's really clean and shiny and lovely. And then you come home, and if you just don't clean it at all, in a month it's going to be filthy again. So the sense restraint is like giving it that weekly clean, or even that daily polish. Yeah, you just keep on cleaning a little bit here, a little bit there, and then when you next go on a retreat or have time on your cushion, the kitchen will be fairly well maintained. So keep your mind like that kitchen, and don't forget to do the ongoing cleaning up. That way you'll have a much more happy life, and everyone around you will benefit as well. So there is the talk for today, and let's have a few questions and some input if you wish. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. And thank you for those who asked, because it's a wonderful subject. I hope it somehow covered both aspects of what was asked. So please put your hand up if you wish. We'll come to you and your voice will be recorded. Rennie, put her hand up. If you did, then please unmute. No? Okay. There's a raise hand button at the bottom. If you prefer, you may put it in the box. And if there's a lot of people, we'll come to those who haven't asked questions before. But I think we already have one.
James Bucky, I asked him to unmute.
Hello.
Hi.
I've just come off retreat, so I'm hoping I'm all squeaky and clean inside, but it's only 2 days, so it probably wasn't enough. I was wondering, can you hear me okay?
Oh, perfect.
Oh, right, sorry. I was saying to actually Shell, who's on the Zoom session today, how since I've started practicing, sometimes I kind of notice like it's like things have changed without me really willing them to. So certain things, like say music or stuff that I used to be into, I no longer am, and without, you know, I haven't been like, oh, I better not do that because Buddha would disapprove. It just happens, and I realized this one time, and I found it kind of disconcerting, but not terribly troubling, but just sort of a curiosity. So I have previously perceived sense restraint as something that you have to do really actively, like, oh, don't look over there, don't look over there, don't do this. But I hadn't really. I've been meditating and, you know, trying to practice, but I hadn't really been intending to do that, you know. So in a sense, it's, well, not automatic, but it can it be, rather than something you split off as something you should be really trying hard at, it's just like something that arises. Yeah,
that's great. And that's pointing towards one of the ways that sense restraint happens is by just enjoying the peace of not having that stimulation, right? I had the exact same experience. Like after my first 10-day retreat in India in like 96, I just stopped listening to all my Led Zeppelin. And I mean, I loved it so much. I was spending weeks compiling all these little tapes to take with me with all my favorite 300 songs. And I just found I didn't need it. And that was, to me, a sense of contentment. You know, like you say, it's not like a condemnation of those things. It's just you don't really need it. And so it's more peaceful without them. And that is a natural outcome of sense restraint. Bear in mind that you have of meditation, but meditation includes sense restraint. So you have been practicing it. But the more we practice, the more natural this becomes, because, you know, we start to be more aware of the things that create happiness and the things that create suffering inside. So I think it's both. I think that, you know, things will happen naturally as a result of practice, especially a result of things like metta. You know, you find you're just not as irritable anymore, or you don't talk to yourself so meanly anymore. But also there's things we can do actively when we do see these defilements coming up. So if you do see that there's a really intense craving, maybe in this case for your music, and you just can't get it, and what are you going to do, you know, then you can decide, right, whether to just feel really miserable about that, or to actually say, oh, never mind, I'll play a Dhamma talk. So that's a kind of sense restraint. Instead of going down that path of stress and, you know, craving and longing, you instead turn towards something that will give you some nourishment and some peace. So I think it's both, you know, and I think especially when things like anger arise in the mind, it's so easy to just kind of let that go round and round the mind, and, you know, and lose our mindfulness. But if the mindfulness does kick in and we see what we're doing, then we can decide to take a different path. So yeah, great. Thanks for sharing, and well done. I'm glad this happened. And 2 days is pretty good. But if you had got enlightened in 2 days, I would pay my respects to you. Yeah. So keep going. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have a retreat with Ajahn Brahm. It's nearly full, if not full. So yeah, we have that in November. Anyone else like to speak? How about the people? How about Diana or Shirley who asked for the talk? Was there anything missing from that, or confusing about that, or that you would have liked us to cover? I'll just read the chat while people have time. There are times when I see someone suffering, like right now with what's happening worldwide, and I feel too much empathy. It can be overwhelming. So sometimes I think it would be easier to close my eyes and ignore what happens, but suffering is there whether I see it or not. Yeah, that's right. It is, isn't it? It is there whether you see it or not. And at the same time, you know, sometimes we need to turn away for a while. Yeah. I mean, this was in the context of anger in the suttas, but the Buddha talked about 5 ways to overcome that. And in a way, you know, when we feel overwhelmed, it's a kind of aversive state. It's a kind of, not aversion in the sense that we're feeling hatred, but it's a kind of negative state of mind, right? It's unpleasant. And so the Buddha gives these various means to overcome, like I say, in that context, anger. And the first one is metta, loving kindness. So you could try to practice loving kindness to yourself. The second one is compassion. The third one is equanimity, which is even more of a refined practice, not always very easy. But the fourth one, interestingly, is to ignore that situation or that person that's causing anger. And in this case, I think we could apply it, that's causing distress or overwhelm. And so at times it's good to take ourselves away and to digest the input that we already have. You know, at that time, perhaps it's you that needs the compassion rather than the situation outside. There's very little at that moment you can do to help. You're not really doing anyone a service by feeling overwhelmed. You know, empathy is a beautiful quality, but really, if you're very sensitive, and I'm the same, it doesn't help to have more input. More input is not necessarily better, you know. Sometimes I only need to hear about something to feel a lot of compassion, and I don't need to know all the gruesome details, you know, especially if it's not if it's leading to fear or leading to a sense of, I don't want to live in England, you know, I don't want to come back, that kind of thing. Then I know I've gone too far. And at that time, it's me who needs the compassion. It's me who needs the rest. And so I would have no problems, and I think it's perfectly ethically fine to actually turn off the TV for some days, you know, do a little retreat, or just decide instead to play some Dhamma talks, or, you know, to just practice some compassion to yourself. That's absolutely allowed. Yeah, and suffering is there either way. So really this whole path is to learn to gently turn toward that suffering without feeling overwhelmed, but to gently turn towards it and understand that this is the nature of the world, you know, and by understanding that, we can actually find a path out. Yeah, if suffering wasn't there, the Buddha said he wouldn't teach the Dhamma. If there was no birth and death, if there was no suffering, he wouldn't teach the Dhamma. But because there is, he teaches the Dhamma. There is an escape. There is a way out of suffering. And there's no way we can end suffering by simply turning away. We always think suffering is something bad. But when I first heard the Buddha's teachings on suffering, it made so much sense. It was so validating. You know, this is the realm of suffering. There's happiness here too in the human realm, but it's a mix. You know, and from time immemorial, there's been war. There's been, you know, people attacking each other, people harming each other. I don't know if this can ever end, but we can start to end that war within ourselves and make sure that we are not capable of such atrocities ourselves. Hope that makes sense. Diana?
And I want to say something.
Yes. I really appreciated the sutta about the tortoise. I had not heard that one before, and I think it's a very good image to remember when guarding the sense doors and recalling the danger in the five senses. It's easy to know that the negative states are harmful and dangerous, but sometimes pleasant states or experiences through the senses, they don't seem as dangerous, but there's a trap in them too. And it's very helpful to think that stillness is prevented by getting caught in that, if that's a goal, keeping the goal in mind. So thank you so much for addressing this topic.
Thank you. Thanks for highlighting that aspect as well, because this is really one of the main reasons I think that we all come together, is to learn to deepen our practice. And yeah, by not guarding the senses, we're actually denying ourselves those beautiful, blissful experiences in deep samadhi, and ultimately the path all the way through to Nibbana. There was one other little sutta that I forgot to mention, but it was really beautiful. And I want to say it here. I mean, this is very full of information and practical suggestions and suttas and all, but hopefully, you know, we can always turn back to it in the future. But this one is also from the Samyutta Nikaya number 35. And 35 is the Salayatana Sutta. So that's the, the Salayatana Nikaya. So it's a whole chapter on the senses, on the sense doors, right? That's the theme. Every single sutta in there, and this is number 239, is about the sense doors. So go for Samyutta Nikaya 35. This is 239. And he says that sense restraint, or guarding the senses, is one of the three qualities by which bhikkhus or bhikkhunis, or a person on the path, lives a life full of joy and happiness, and also lays the foundation for the destruction of the taints, for the destruction of the asavas, the outflowings, you could say the defilements of the mind, in short. So sense restraint is one of the three qualities by which someone lives full of happiness and joy and lays the foundation for the destruction of the taints. And the other two, which I'm sure you're curious to know, are wakefulness. You could see that as an aspect of sense restraint, not overindulging in sleep, or underindulging, okay? Because that's also not very helpful. You're not very wakeful if you wake up after 2 hours, right? You're kind of feeling rotten. And the third one is moderation in food. Again, doesn't mean not eating enough. It means the right amount of food to keep the body healthy and fit for practicing the spiritual path. So with those three things, that lays a great foundation, and it brings happiness and joy. So even that far on the path, we can be experiencing that pleasure of the mind that the Buddha called abhyasekara sukha. It's a kind of happiness, the happiness of the unsullied or unblemished happiness. Yeah. And I think that means unblemished by the sense impressions. It's like a happiness that starts bubbling up from inside. So wonderful. Thank you for your lovely comments and your lovely practice and presence. And I would like to spend the last 5 minutes with an announcement, first from one of the co-hosts and then about the next events. If you have 5 more minutes, that would be great.
Hi, everyone. It's up to me to say a few words about Dana. It is really wonderful that the teaching of the Dhamma is offered freely in this way, and that we all get the opportunity to listen and learn and apply the teachings to our lives and in our practice. And we can show our gratitude through the giving to support the Sangha. So if you would like to offer Dana, anything that you are able to give would be very much appreciated. It will continue to provide for Venerable Chanda's material needs and help her to continue to spread the Dhamma in this way. And of course, it will support the setting up and the development of the first Bhikkhuni monastery in the UK. I have put the link to the website where you can find out how to donate in the chat box, and do also go there to find out more about the project and the new dates and times for upcoming events. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. And just to say actually that even today we will receive some potential properties online that we're going to have a look at, and let's see. I think it's hard with the housing market. You have to be super fast, and you have to be super quick and put about 100,000 over the actual asking price to get a chance. So, but anyway, we're still looking, and it might not happen soon, but it's happening. That's the thing. And in the meantime, as an educational charity as well, we're doing a lot of events, and fortunately, I'm going to Perth very soon in a couple of days for a long retreat. Before then, I'm going to be teaching. Actually, after that, when I get there, I'm going to be giving some more sutta classes, but they're going to be on Sunday, because over there I'll be much further ahead. So instead of these talks, not next week, but the following 2 weeks or 3 weeks, there's going to be sutta classes on a Sunday, and they're going to be the morning time for you, about 9:45. I think it's 3 weeks that I'm doing it for. Is it? Yeah. So there'll be 3 more of those, and also metta meditation on the Saturdays. So sutta on Sunday mornings and metta on Saturday, because I want to give you a boost before I'm on my long retreat. So that'll be about 6 sessions. And in my absence, there'll be lots of talks by other bhikkhunis. So I'm really looking forward to that, and just finalizing the schedule now. Additionally, we've just put out registration for Ajahn Brown's retreat. And if you're quick on the uptake with the newsletter, you'll probably have already booked a place. You won't have received confirmation yet, unless, I don't know, I don't think you've received it yet, because we're waiting to see how many people apply. We're getting full, we're really, I think there's going to be a wait list of like 100 people. It's crazy. And again, we're doing that on a donation basis. And this is really exciting. There's a registration fee to ensure that you do turn up. And yeah, I think it's wonderful, even though there are significant costs to meet, to make sure no one is left out. And yeah, I encourage the beauty and the joy of sharing generously without any expectation, from our side, and also without being asked, it's different. It's a different feeling. It's a different feeling. Hopefully that will bring up gratitude and bring up a little bit more of the practice of generosity and the joy that can bring. So that's the announcements for now. And please do still apply, even if you haven't, because there may still be spaces. We are trying to prioritize members of the community, but we won't be able to accept everybody. It's just impossible because there's so many applications. So we're doing our best to get through some of those as soon as we can. Yeah. So I think that's all. Thank you, Rennie, for putting the chat in the box. In addition to the Sunday sessions, when I'm away, there will be, from now on, actually 2 silent meditation sessions a week, courtesy of Matthias, on a Tuesday and a Thursday. So that will continue, and it's twice a week now. So Timmy Hendricks, hey, I'm just seeing the beautiful dog, Diana's dog. I stayed with her for a few days and I love the Timmy Hendrix. That's his name. Isn't it cool? And he's so beautiful and he meditated with us. Hi, Timmy. Timmy. Oh, so I think that's all from me. And I think you must be wanting to get away from this crazy dog lady, myself. And let's unmute you. We'll stop the recording. Bye.